God, it's hot, and it's raining, so it's loud. I love my life.
Well, that was a movie.
Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I just watched Bullet Train, the new film by director David Leitch, who's most known for Deadpool 2, but also did movies like Atomic Blonde, Hobbs and Shaw, and a couple other things. Before he was a director, he was also a stunt coordinator and choreographer. He worked on movies like John Wick and a lot of other things before eventually becoming a director and making his own movies. So I've never really been a big fan of his work as a director. His stunt coordination's always been good, but I wasn't a big fan of Deadpool 2. Wasn't a big fan of Hobbs and Shaw, never saw Atomic Blonde, so I went into this movie hoping it would be good based on the trailer and the trailer alone. I don't really care for his previous works. In fact, I would actually say Deadpool 2 was pretty garbage to me. I hated that movie. But anyway, I went into this movie based on the trailer, which, as you can see from the trailer, is starring Brad Pitt, but it also has a really big cast. It's got Brad Pitt, Joey King, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Brian Tyree Henry, Andrew Koji, Hiroki Sanada, Michael Shannon, Sandra Bullock, Bad Bunny, Logan Lerman, Zazie Beetz, and it also has a small but fun cameo by Channing Tatum. And honestly, he's probably, frankly, the best thing about this movie. So yeah, it's got a really good cast, a really deep cast. It's got a lot of great actors in this movie, and it's got a pretty fun concept, which, in case you haven't seen the trailer, is Brad Pitt plays a smash and grab artist. He's a hitman who's now trying to be non-violent, and so he's hired to take a briefcase off of this train and get away. But unfortunately for him, there's a lot of other people on this train that are all trying to get specific jobs done too. So there's other hitmen, there's other people trying to get this briefcase. There's a lot going on, and it can feel like too much at times, but I enjoyed most of it. So this movie really reminded me of an American Guy Ritchie movie. If you're not familiar with Guy Ritchie's style, he has a very frantic way of telling stories. He's got a standard plot that goes out that gets muddled and more convoluted as it goes, because every time you introduce a new character, you double back to tell their whole backstory before catching back up. So every 5 minutes, there'll be a new character and a new cutaway, a new backstory, a new flashback to this character's story and how they're integrated into this plot, and the plot gets more and more complicated as it goes. So even though there's a pretty simple basis to it, it gets really complex by the end of it, and this felt very similar. I wouldn't compare it necessarily to Guy Ritchie's classic work like Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, but this did remind me a lot of his more recent work like Wrath of Man and The Gentleman. I was reminded of those movies constantly because it has that style, although it is also very obviously American. Guy Ritchie's movies are very, very British. This movie's very not, except for it's got a couple of characters who speak in a British accent, but beyond that, this feels like an American-made movie. I was expecting it to feel a little bit more like Deadpool 2, which it still has that sense of humor and level of violence to it, but that humor and violence is fairly similar, honestly, to Guy Ritchie's humor already, and then you add in all of these quick cuts and these cutaway jokes and backstory, and that was really loud thunder. I don't know if you could hear it, but geez, that sounded close. It's a very interesting style that is fairly unique to Guy Ritchie, so part of me was kind of like, man, he's biting on his style like he's trying to be like somebody else, but at the same time, I enjoy that style. Now, that style is, to put it bluntly, extremely unpopular among critics. None of Guy Ritchie's recent movies have done well among critics, at least not the recent ones, and neither is this. This has a 49%. However, it does have a 7.5 on IMDb currently, and that's usually how Guy Ritchie movies go, is audiences like them and critics don't. I tend to lean toward critics more than audience scores, typically, but Guy Ritchie is an area that I disagree with critics on regularly. I enjoy Guy Ritchie movies. I wouldn't say most of them, at least not the recent ones, are classics. They're not really high art, and this isn't either, but certainly more enjoyable than a 49%. I'm leaning toward like a 6 or a 6.5 with this. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I enjoy it. And part of it has to do with that very frantic pace, that very crazy way that they like to just be like, all right, well, telling this story, oh, but what about this character? What about that character? What's going on here? It's very complex very quickly, and I enjoy that because you get so much backstory so quickly, and it's just fun to like tease your mind, and you're trying to figure out what's going on with a lot of different stuff. Also, the sense of humor I enjoy a lot. This movie at its best is hilarious. There are some jokes and moments that really do miss, but when the jokes work, they are great. And then the action, same thing. I love David Leitch's style of action and direction. There are moments when, things start exploding and, in Hobbs and Shaw, they're jumping off of buildings and landing on cars and stuff, and that is obnoxious. I find that kind of action really lame and boring. But the hand-to-hand stuff, like John Wick type stuff, or at least the more subdued, more realistic side of John Wick, that stuff is really entertaining to me. And when you get that style of action and confine it to a train car, there's some really entertaining moments in that. So yeah, the action is good, the humor is good, and the acting, like I said, the cast is great. So the only thing really missing to this is some of the storytelling and the pacing and character development, all of that is weak at times. Now, like I said, I do enjoy the story. I enjoy where it goes. But this movie, which is only 2 hours and 6 minutes, felt like about 4 hours. Like, I really got bored by the end of it. And it's not like it was a really long movie. It's only 2 hours. But something with the pacing just made me want it to end. Like, it kept going and going. I was like, how many more twists and turns can we pull here? Yeah, they were good twists, and I enjoyed where the movie was going. I wouldn't say it was the least predictable thing in the world, but I enjoyed the thought process. I enjoyed how it kind of subverted expectations just a little bit. I enjoyed all of that, but it just, I don't know, it took too long getting to those ideas. They may have been good ideas, but it was a little too slow and a little bit too much. Like maybe 1 or 2 twists too many. Like this could have stopped a little bit earlier. And then as far as Brad Pitt's character, he's the main character, he really is. There are moments when the plot deviates from him, the film goes away from him to focus on other characters for a while, but he is the main character. And he's also, to me, he felt like the least developed character. Like I said, throughout this movie, they're constantly cutting away to these backstories, these quick cutaway jokes and little snippets of why these people are here and why they're important and why they are the way they are. And we don't really get that so much with Brad Pitt's character. What we get with him is an exposition dump in the form of a phone conversation at the beginning of this movie where he's on the phone with Sandra Bullock just talking about his job and his past, and it's just really lame, especially when in contrast with the rest of the movie where it's all show don't tell. And so you get to see these characters in action, you get to see why they're interesting, you get to see them doing what they're doing. And then there's Brad Pitt's character, and you're supposedly supposed to care about him just because you're told to care about him, and you don't really get to see it. And it's not like I disliked his backstory, but I just didn't feel as invested in it, say, as like Aaron Taylor Johnson's character. He was probably my favorite character in the movie. Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry they're in the trailer, they play these two hitmen that work together, and I loved them. I wish they were the main character because everything about their story was so much more interesting than anything that was going on with Brad Pitt. But like I said, they're side characters, so every time the movie moves away from them, it's a little bit disappointing. Now, I do love them whenever they're on screen, and it's not a bad thing to have side characters that are really entertaining, but it is unfortunate when the main character just isn't quite as entertaining. There's other characters that are in this movie for a couple of scenes at most, and they're extremely interesting. Like Bad Bunny's character, he's in it for a couple of scenes, they go over his backstory, and it is a much more interesting plot to me than the actual movie was. And there's a couple of characters like that. I don't want to get into spoilers yet, but it just felt like there's so much going on here that I love to see this backstory. I love when there's good backstory in a movie. I love when it's quick. Like Guy Ritchie does this in all of his movies, where he always gives more backstory than is necessary, but never more than you actually want. Tarantino does this as well, where there's constant cutaways and references to things, and it makes it feel more real. It makes it feel more entertaining and interesting, and it makes you invested into all of these characters, even if they're only there briefly. So it is a shame, like I said, though, that Brad Pitt's character, and Brad Pitt is good in this movie. He was really funny. He had half the great jokes in this movie. He was an interesting character. He was well acted, but he wasn't the most interesting thing about the movie, and that's not Brad Pitt's fault. That's just the story's fault. I did enjoy it a lot, but there are definite flaws to it. Like also the plot, doesn't really make all that much sense when you stop and think about it. Once again, I'm not going to get into spoilers as far as the bad guy's plan because it's idiotic, but things with just like the train, by the way. They're on this train. 90% of this movie, at least as far as the linear storytelling goes, it takes place on this train. And there's stuff like an emergency door gets blown off, or one of the windshield breaks, and the train just keeps going from stop to stop. Like, nobody's like, our train blew up. Maybe we should, take it off the rails and figure out what's going on. Like, nope. Slowly but surely, passengers are getting off and leaving, so the train becomes emptier and emptier. But, nobody's actually calling the police or figuring out what the hell's going on. We're just like, yeah, sure. There's just the usual. Sure, why not? So, there's definite stuff about this movie that you can't think too hard about stuff like that. You just have to enjoy, the characters and the humor and the fighting and all of that. So, it is an action blockbuster movie in the style of Guy Ritchie. It is all of those things. It's not trying to be too highbrow. But when you compare it to something like Marvel, for instance, the MCU, it is a similar brand, but a more intelligent, more thoughtful, more artistic version of that thing. Now, the difference between this and, say, an MCU movie is that runtime issue, where, like I said, it's only 2 hours, so it's not that long, but it felt like 4. So, yeah, it's a slightly more highbrow MCU movie to me. That's kind of that category, where it is a popcorn flick, but a somewhat intelligent, artistically done popcorn flick. So I enjoyed it, but I'm not saying it's going to be on my top 10 list at the end of the year or anything. I mean, it could sneak on. It could be like a sneaky 9 or 10 on there, but it's not, it's not winning Oscars or anything like that. So that's what I had to think without getting into spoilers. I think I will get into spoilers very briefly. There's not too much more I want to say about it because it is fairly straightforward, but I did enjoy it. So if you saw it, let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye. So, spoilers. The bad guy ends up being this Michael Shannon character who he's orchestrating all of these different people that have wronged him throughout his life to all be on this train together to try to kill each other. And that's just kind of nonsensical. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. I don't really care, It's a very non-plot. Really, the more important the characters, the less you care about them. I didn't care about his character at all, frankly, even though he's built up so much. He's got some cool things, he likes to play Russian roulette, which is cool, although kind of lame when you realize he's a Russian character, so it's I guess a stereotype, so it's kind of silly. But anyway, and then the Joey King's character ends up being his daughter, which is just unnecessary and kind of lame. And then you have Tangerine and Lemon, which is Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry. At first, you think the one guy's dead, and then the other guy does die, and then the guy that you thought died first isn't dead, and then he goes on and does this other stuff. And it's there's just some, I feel dissatisfied with the resolution of some of those characters. But ultimately, yeah, I enjoyed their plotline more, like that little mid-credit scene, even though it's only 5 seconds in the credits, of having Lemon come back and kill the main bad guy with a cart full of tangerines made the ending a lot better, because that ending was kind of lame. I feel like this movie could have been a half hour shorter and it would have been really good. And I think for some reason, maybe it's because it's based on a book, maybe they were just trying to be faithful to the book and keep in as many details as possible, but I feel like we could have cut some stuff out and streamlined the plot a little bit, had a few less fake out deaths, maybe not have the train crash, and then this would have been a good ending and it could have been a lot cleaner and more interesting. Because really, everything after people start coming back to life, I was out on the movie. I really just didn't care anymore at that point. And the girl character, Joey King, she just disappears for about 30 minutes. And you're like, where? I thought she was important. Where'd she go? What's she doing? What? So, it got messy. It got a little too messy at the end. And I know these Guy Ritchie style movies, they do get messy, and that's kind of the point, is they get really complex and convoluted. But I just felt like it just went a little too long for its own good and started falling apart at the end. So, yeah, I still enjoyed it. Mainly I enjoyed it because the characters were so much fun. Brad Pitt's character, I know I was complaining he was one of the lesser interesting characters, but he still was really funny. He had some really good jokes. I enjoyed his fight with Bad Bunny's character. You see that in the trailer where he's like, I don't even know who you are, why are you trying to kill me? But that was a fun moment. Bad Bunny's character arc, by the way, his story, that's what I'm talking about. I wish that was a movie in of itself. That was such an interesting story. And then the twins, supposedly, Tangerine and Lemon, I love their story. I wish they were the main characters. I think the train bit went on a little too long when they kept talking about Thomas the Tank Engine. They just, they referenced it like too many times. I know it came back because of, like, he put the sticker on the girl, so it had a meaning. Everything that happens in this movie happens for a reason. Like, there was this mascot, this Japanese mascot, and when the train cars took the briefcase, and then he took the briefcase back and punched in the face, and it's supposed to be like a throwaway joke, you think, but it's very obvious that the person in there is going to come back and be important later, because why would it take the briefcase from a passenger? That doesn't make any sense. So, like, you knew pretty early on that's going to be a bad guy, but then the bad guy dies immediately after getting out of the costume, because that's Zazie Beetz' character, and she just dies right away. And so there's things about, like, I enjoyed the backstories, but then you see these characters and they come and go so quickly. Like, her character and Bad Bunny's character I really liked, and then they each have like 10 minutes of screen time, if that. And Channing Tatum's character, I love that. Like, is this a sex thing? It was so funny. I loved how he kept going back. It actually almost made me think that he was going to be a bad guy or somebody important, because it kept showing him. But no, he was just funny. He was just there to be funny, and he was hilarious. So I really did think this movie was hilarious. It was a lot of fun. The length of it, or I keep saying length, it's only 2 hours, but the way it dragged out, the pacing of it, really is the biggest flaw, because I can overlook some of the ridiculous action, some of the jokes that miss, some of the character beats that miss, if it just, wrapped up when it should have. So I don't know if I'm ever going to rewatch this movie because of that, because I feel like I'll want to see the first hour again, but then I'll get bored and turn it off. So maybe I'll watch it if it comes on TV for a while, but I don't ever really see myself buying this movie and choosing to watch it. Like, if it comes on, like I said, I'll watch part of it, but I don't even think the whole thing. So this movie, yeah, to me, like I said, 6 or 6.5. I wanted to give it a 7 because I really enjoyed parts of it, but just the way it ended was so lackluster that I can't say that I really enjoyed it that much. It was just good, but not great. So that's what I did think. Like I said already, what do you guys think, though? Let me know in the comments below, and of course, don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.